Fresh from performing a 6-hour brain surgery, Dr. Maya Thompson strode into Elite Motors wearing her Chanel suit, and Christian Louboutin heals her dark skin glowing with confidence after saving yet another life in the operating room. The scent of new leather and luxury cars filled the showroom as she approached the gleaming new Porsche 911 GT3. While other customers received champagne and warm greetings, she stood invisible, her Harvard medical degree and seven-figure bank account meaning nothing in that moment. The morning had started like any other, with Dr. Thompson masterfully completing a complex surgical procedure that had other doctors marveling at her precision and skill. Her patient, a young mother of 3, would now live to see her children grow up, thanks to Dr. Thompson's steady hands and brilliant mind. As she changed from her surgical scrubs into her designer outfit, she had felt on top of the world, ready to finally treat herself to the car of her dreams. The Light Motors showroom gleamed under crystal chandeliers with marble floors that echoed beneath her heels. As she walked past row after row of exotic vehicles she had researched extensively, reading every review and specification of the Porsche 911 GT3 she could find. Her financial advisor had already prepared all the documents showing her substantial assets and pristine credit score tucked neatly in her Hermes wallet. Dr. Thompson watched as a young white couple entered the dealership. 20 minutes after her, they were immediately greeted by Thomas Brooks, the sales manager, who rushed forward with fresh espresso and pastries from the dealership's private cafe. The couple wore casual clothes and appeared to be browsing with no serious intention to purchase, yet 3 salespeople hovered around them explaining the features of a basic model. Another 30 minutes passed as Dr. Thompson stood near the vehicle she intended to purchase, her hand occasionally brushing against its flawless midnight blue paint. She noticed how the salespeople's eyes would dart toward her before quickly looking away, their bodies physically turning to avoid any possibility of interaction. She had experienced this before in other high-end stores, but never so blatantly, never with such coordinated effort to make her feel unwelcome. A group of businessmen entered, laughing loudly, their suits wrinkled from a long day at the office. Once again, the staff sprung into action, offering test drives and financing options. Meanwhile, Dr. Thompson pulled out her phone, checking the time. She had already spent 45 minutes being deliberately ignored in a place where she intended to spend over $200,000. She thought about her father, who had always taught her to handle discrimination with grace and intelligence, document everything he would say, and let them reveal their own prejudices. Her mother's voice echoed in her mind, reminding her that success was the best revenge. As she watched another customer receive the red carpet treatment, Dr. Thompson began subtly recording on her phone, capturing the revolving door of preferential treatment playing out before her. The dealership's promotional video played on loop on massive screens throughout the showroom, ironically showcasing their commitment to exceptional customer service and equal treatment for all. The words diversity and inclusion flashed across the screen, but in real time Dr. Thompson stood as living proof of their hypocrisy. She noticed cameras in every corner of the showroom, mentally noting their positions, knowing they were documenting every minute she was being ignored. Her surgical colleague, Dr. James Chen, had purchased the same model Porsche from Elite Motors just last week, raving about the exceptional service and the champagne toast they had shared to celebrate his purchase. He had even mentioned her name to the staff, telling them to expect her, yet here she stood invisible despite her achievements, her wealth, and her status in the medical community. The contrast could not have been more stark or more damning. Sales manager Thomas Brooks finally acknowledged her presence after finishing yet another champagne toast with customers who had entered nearly an hour after Dr. Thompson. His expensive cologne announced his arrival before he did, walking toward her with the kind of practiced swagger that came from years of deciding who deserved to be in his showroom. What happened next would be viewed millions of times on social media and would ultimately change the landscape of luxury retail forever. Dr. Thompson had already activated her phone's camera, discreetly positioning it in her hand as Brooks approached, his face wearing what she would later describe to the court as the look of someone who had been forced to deal with an unwanted interruption. His silver Rolex glinted under the showroom lights as he gestured dismissively toward the door, suggesting she might find more suitable options at Budget Motors across town, his voice dripping with condescension, unaware that he was dealing with someone who had graduated top of her class and built her career by outsmarting those who underestimated her. The dealership had fallen eerily quiet as other customers stopped their conversations to watch the interaction. Brooks spoke loudly enough to ensure everyone could hear his dismissal, his words echoing across the marble floors, telling Dr. Thompson that the vehicles in their showroom started at prices that would likely be outside her comfort zone. She remained perfectly calm, her years of handling high pressure situations in the operating room serving her well as she allowed Brooks to continue digging his own professional grave. Without breaking eye contact, Dr. Thompson reached into her arm's bag and retrieved the folder containing her bank statements, property portfolios, and proof of her position as chief of neurosurgery at the city's most prestigious hospital. Brooks barely glanced at the documents, his face twisting into a smirk as he suggested that perhaps she had wandered into the wrong establishment. She noticed how he kept his hands clasped behind his back, refusing to touch the papers she held out as if they might somehow contaminate him. Other salespeople had gathered at a safe distance, their faces showing a mix of discomfort and silent complicity as their manager continued his public humiliation attempt. Dr. Thompson thought about every medical student she had mentored, every young person of color who had faced similar barriers, and decided this would be the moment to take a stand. Her phone still recording as Brooks suggested that luxury vehicles required a certain level of sophistication to appreciate properly. The security cameras in each corner of the showroom captured the scene from multiple angles, their red lights blinking as if in anticipation of their footage becoming crucial evidence. Dr. Thompson had already noted the camera positions, having learned from her father, a retired civil rights attorney, the importance of documentation in moments like these. She spoke clearly and professionally, making sure every word was captured, asking Brooks to clarify exactly what he meant by sophistication. A young salesperson in the background looked increasingly uncomfortable, shifting from foot to foot as the confrontation continued. She would later come forward as a witness, describing how the dealership maintained an unwritten policy of discouraging certain customers from making purchases. Dr. Thompson noticed the young woman's discomfort, filing it away as Brooks continued his performance, unaware that his carefully worded implications were being recorded from multiple angles. The moment reached its crescendo as Brooks suggested that Dr. Thompson might feel more at home browsing online instead of taking up valuable showroom space. She stood her full height, years of maintaining composure in the operating room evident in her stance as she pulled out her final piece of documentation, a copy of the dealership's own sales records showing preferential treatment patterns that her legal team had already obtained through public records. Her quiet confidence finally cracking. Brooks practiced figured as he realized she was not the easy target he had assumed her to be. Owner Gerald Maxwell strutted onto the showroom floor like a peacock in his tailored Italian suit, his reputation as the city's premier luxury car dealer preceding him. The sound of his handmade Oxford shoes clicking against the marble floor announced his arrival before his voice did, his steel grey hair perfectly coiffed and his posture radiating the kind of arrogance that came from decades of unchallenged authority in the luxury car world. What he didn't expect was the immovable force that was Dr. Maya Thompson. The tension in the showroom crackled like electricity before a storm as Maxwell approached, his trademark smile plastered across his face, the same smile that graced billboards across the city advertising Elite Motors as the destination for luxury car enthusiasts. Dr. Thompson stood her ground, her phone still recording, as the owner attempted to smooth over the situation with practiced charm that had diffused countless complaints before. Dr. Thompson calmly played the security footage she'd already obtained, showing 3 hours of his staff pawning over white customers while deliberately ignoring her. The color drained from Maxwell's face as she revealed her position as chief of neurosurgery and her connections to the city's most powerful medical boards, his carefully maintained facade cracking slightly as he realized this situation was rapidly spinning beyond his control. The other customers in the showroom had formed a loose semicircle around the confrontation, their own shopping experiences forgotten as they witnessed what was quickly becoming a masterclass in composed confrontation. Maxwell attempted to interrupt several times, his voice growing increasingly strained as Dart Thompson methodically presented evidence of systematic discrimination within his dealership, including time stamped footage of that very day. Behind Maxwell, the young, uncomfortable salesperson from earlier had moved closer, her face showing a mix of fear and relief as Dust Thompson revealed printed copies of internal emails showing the dealership's coded language for profiling customers. Maxwell's right hand twitched toward the documents, but Dust Thompson smoothly slid them back into her designer bag, her ears in the operating room evident in her precise movements. Thompson spoke with the same measured tone she used when explaining complex procedures to her medical students, her words cutting through Maxwell's blustering attempts at damage control. She referenced specific instances of discrimination documented over the past 6 months, naming dates, times, and employees involved, while Maxwell's complexion took on an increasingly grayish tinge. The showroom's ambient music had stopped, though no one had noticed, when creating an eerie silence broken only by the sound of Dart Thompson's voice and the occasional shuffle of expensive shoes on marble as observers adjusted their positions to better witness the unfolding scene. Maxwell's previous attempts at charm had completely evaporated, replaced by a barely concealed panic as he realized the extent of documentation she possessed. Security cameras whirred quietly overhead, capturing every moment as Dart Thompson revealed her awareness of the dealership's internal rating system for customers, a system that had nothing to do with credit scores or purchasing power and everything to do with profiles that would soon become evidence in a landmark discrimination case. Maxwell's attempts to defend his staff grew increasingly desperate as she produced screenshots of internal messages sharing coded warnings when minority customers entered the showroom. The confrontation reached its peak as Dart Thompson finally revealed her coup de grace, a comprehensive report compiled by her legal team showing a clear pattern of discrimination across all Elite Motors locations, the thickness of the document making a satisfying thud. As she placed it on the hood of the very Porsche she had come to purchase, Maxwell's face transformed through a range of emotions from dismissive to concerned to barely concealed terror as he realized this brilliant surgeon had documented everything with the same precision she used in the operating room. As she concluded her presentation, Thompson finally allowed herself a small smile, not of triumph, but of determination, the same expression she wore before beginning a particularly challenging surgery. She had given Maxwell and his dealership the opportunity to make things right, but their response would determine whether this would end with a simple apology and policy change or become a watershed moment in the fight against retail discrimination. The courthouse buzzed with energy as Dot Thompson walked down the marble hallway, her Bottega Veneta briefcase containing evidence that would shake the automotive industry to its core. Television cameras flashed while her attorney Sarah Chen, a former civil rights prosecutor who had never lost a discrimination case, strode confidently beside her, their footsteps echoing in perfect synchronization through the historic building. The courtroom itself was packed to capacity with spectators, journalists, and industry representatives filling every available seat. The morning sunlight streaming through tall windows cast dramatic shadows across the ornate wooden panels as Dot Thompson took her place at the witness stand, her composure unwavering under the weight of hundreds of watching eyes. Judge Miranda Harrison, a veteran of civil rights cases, studied the room with sharp eyes that had seen decades of discrimination cases. Sarah Chen approached the podium, her reputation for ruthless precision preceding her. As she began presenting the evidence, the large screens positioned throughout the courtroom displayed security footage from Elite Motors, showing a stark contrast in customer treatment, the timestamps clearly visible as salespeople rushed to assist certain customers while systematically ignoring others. The footage ran for 45 minutes without a single interruption from the defense team, who sat in increasingly uncomfortable silence. Thompson's testimony began with her credentials, her voice steady as she detailed her journey from Harvard Medical School to becoming one of the nation's top neurosurgeons, her words painting a picture not of someone seeking special treatment, but of a highly qualified customer who had been judged solely on appearance. The jury leaned forward in their seats as she described the 45 minutes she spent being deliberately ignored, while other customers received champagne and personal tours. The evidence mounted as Chen masterfully wove together testimony from former employees, security footage, internal emails, and statistical analysis showing a clear pattern of discrimination at Elite Motors. Thompson remained poised as photographs of the dealership's coded customer rating system were displayed on the courtroom screens. The defense team shifted nervously in their seats as their own internal documents were used to expose their discriminatory practices. From the gallery, observers watched as Chen introduced testimony from James Chen, no relation to the attorney who had purchased the same model Porsche just days before Dr. Thompson's visit. His experience of being treated like royalty standing in stark contrast to her treatment. The jury took careful notes as the evidence showed identical financial qualifications but drastically different customer service based solely on appearance. Perhaps most damaging was the testimony of former customers who had experienced similar discrimination at Elite Motors, a successful African American software entrepreneur, a Hispanic real estate developer, and an Indian cardiac surgeon, each recounting nearly identical experiences of being ignored, redirected to lower-end vehicles, or outright dismissed, the pattern becoming impossible to ignore as Chen methodically presented case after case. The defense team's attempts to interrupt were quietly but firmly shut down by Judge Harrison as Chen presented a devastating statistical analysis showing that minority customers with higher credit scores and income levels consistently received inferior service compared to other customers with lower qualifications. The data spanning 5 years of Elite Motors operations revealed a systematic pattern that could not be explained away as coincidence or misunderstanding. Thompson maintained her professional demeanor as audio recordings from her confrontation with Gerald Maxwell were played for the court. His condescending tone and thinly veiled prejudice filling the silent courtroom. Several jurors visibly reacted to his suggestion that she might be more comfortable shopping elsewhere, their expressions shifting from shock to barely concealed anger as the full extent of the discrimination became clear. The morning session concluded with Chen presenting a series of internal training documents from Elite Motors showing how new employees were taught to profile customers using coded language and subtle signals. The defense team had attempted to prevent these documents from being admitted, but Judge Harrison had ruled them crucial to establishing the systematic nature of the discrimination. The morning sun, now high in the sky, seemed to spotlight Thompson as she sat perfectly straight, her expression serene, knowing that her stand against injustice was creating ripples that would soon become waves. Elite Motors lead attorney Richard Sterling rose from his chair, his $600 per hour confidence emanating from his perfectly tailored suit. As he approached the podium, his reputation for turning seemingly impossible cases around preceded him in legal circles, but the moment he locked eyes with Dr. Thompson, he sensed this case would be different. Her unwavering gaze reflected years of handling high-pressure situations where lives hung in the balance. Sterling attempted to paint Thompson as an attention seeker, suggesting that she had orchestrated the entire incident for social media fame. His carefully practiced tone carrying through the courtroom as he presented Elite Motors' diversity hiring statistics and charitable contributions to minority organizations. The strategy backfired spectacularly when surveillance footage from multiple angles showed the dealership's staff literally hiding behind vehicles and ducking into offices to avoid minority customers. The defense team's carefully constructed narrative began to unravel as their own evidence contradicted their claims. Sterling fumbled through his cross-examination as Thompson calmly referenced specific dates, times, and incidents that directly contradicted his attempts to minimize the discrimination. Her photographic memory, honed through years of medical practice, proved devastating as she recalled every detail of her experience with perfect clarity. A murmur rippled through the courtroom as Sterling attempted to suggest that Dot Thompson had misinterpreted normal sales procedures. The seasoned attorney found himself backpedaling as she produced recordings of Gerald Maxwell making racially charged comments about his own employees during a staff meeting. The hot mic incident, captured during what Maxwell thought was a private conversation, revealed the true culture at Elite Motors. The jury leaned forward in their seats as Sterling tried to explain away a series of internal emails using coded language to describe potential customers. Dot Thompson remained composed as her legal team projected screenshot after screenshot showing how Elite Motors employees shared warnings when minority customers entered the showroom, the coded messages becoming more damning as their true meaning was revealed. Sterling's voice grew increasingly strained as he attempted to justify the dealership's customer rating system, which supposedly ranked clients based on purchasing potential, yet documentation showed that wealthy minority customers were consistently rated lower than white customers with fewer assets. The statistical analysis presented by Dot Thompson's team left no room for alternative interpretation. The defense strategy shifted desperately as Sterling called character witnesses to testify about Elite Motors' community involvement, but each testimony seemed to dig the hole deeper as cross-examination revealed these initiatives were largely superficial and implemented only after discrimination complaints began surfacing. Dot Thompson sat perfectly still, her surgical precision evident in her every movement as she watched the defense case collapse. Perhaps the most damaging moment came when Sterling attempted to discredit Dot Thompson's financial qualifications, only to have her team reveal that she had a higher net worth than Gerald Maxwell himself. The courtroom fell silent as documentation showed her numerous medical patents, successful investments, and property holdings, making her more than qualified to purchase every vehicle in the Elite Motors showroom. The afternoon sun cast long shadows through the courtroom windows as Sterling made one final attempt to salvage his case, suggesting that the entire incident was a misunderstanding based on Dot Thompson arriving during a particularly busy time. Security footage immediately displayed on the courtroom screens showed multiple salespeople available and actively avoiding eye contact with her while rushing to greet other customers. Judge Harrison watched with increasing scrutiny as Sterling's defense strategy crumbled. His usual courtroom theatrics, falling flat against the mountain of evidence and Dot Thompson's unshakable testimony. Even Gerald Maxwell, sitting at the defense table, had begun to look defeated, his earlier arrogance replaced by the realization that his empire was built on foundations that could no longer withstand scrutiny. As the defense portion of the day drew to a close, Sterling's final questions seemed more like desperate attempts to create reasonable doubt than any real defense of Elite Motors' actions. Dot Thompson maintained her professional demeanor throughout, her responses measured and precise, just as they would be when explaining complex medical procedures to colleagues, her composure only serving to highlight the increasing disarray of the defense team. Jessica Martinez, a former Elite Motors finance manager, approached the witness stand, her hands trembling slightly as she adjusted her blazer, the weight of what she was about to reveal visible in every careful movement. Her testimony would later be described as the moment that broke Elite Motors' carefully constructed facade of respectability. The courtroom fell into complete silence as she raised her right hand to take the oath. The young finance professional had worked at Elite Motors for 6 years, rising through the ranks until she reached a position that gave her access to the dealership's most closely guarded secrets. Her voice grew stronger as she described the elaborate coding system used to profile customers: red dots for minorities, green for preferred customers, blue for time wasters. The system embedded so deeply in the dealership's operations that it appeared in everything from computer records to staff WhatsApp groups. Martinez pulled out her personal notebook containing 3 years of detailed records, documenting every instance of discrimination she had witnessed. Her meticulous notes, including dates, times, and names of both employees and affected customers. Judge Harrison leaned forward with interest as Martinez explained how she had begun documenting these incidents after witnessing a wealthy African-American surgeon being directed to used vehicles despite qualifying for any new car in the showroom. The testimony took an even more dramatic turn as Martinez revealed the existence of monthly bonus meetings where employees were rewarded for maintaining what management called the right customer profile. She produced recordings of these meetings, captured on her phone, showing Gerald Maxwell himself praising staff members who had successfully discouraged minority customers from making purchases while maintaining a legally defensible facade of politeness. Tears welled in Martina's eyes as she described watching countless qualified customers being subjected to discriminatory practices, her voice catching as she recounted how employees celebrated denying financing to minority customers with perfect credit scores while fast tracking approvals for less qualified preferred customers. The jury watched intently as she walked them through the dealership's internal communication system, where racist jokes and coded warnings about minority customers were openly shared. Gerald Maxwell slumped further in his chair as Martinez detailed how the discriminatory practices had become more sophisticated over time, evolving from obvious rejection to subtle discouragements that would be harder to prove in court. She explained how salespeople were trained to quote higher prices to certain customers, use delaying tactics until they left, and create artificial obstacles in the financing process, even for cash buyers. The courtroom gasped audibly as Martinez displayed screenshots of the dealership's internal customer relationship management system, showing how customer profiles were flagged with different colors, determining the level of service they would receive. She demonstrated how even before customers entered the showroom, their names were run through social media searches to determine their ethnicity and appearance, with notes added to their profiles. Sarah Chen approached the evidence table, retrieving a thick binder as Martinez described the weekly sales meetings where employees were taught to recognize subtle signs that would identify preferred versus unwanted customers. The binder contained years of meeting minutes, training materials, and internal memorandums, all carefully preserved by Martinez, who had been planning her whistleblower testimony for months. The defense team appeared visibly shaken as Martinez continued her testimony, describing how she had witnessed Gerald Maxwell personally instructing managers to find creative ways to discourage certain customers from completing purchases. Her detailed account included specific instances where highly qualified minority customers were told vehicles were sold or unavailable, only to be sold to other customers hours later. Perhaps most damaging was Martinez's revelation of the dealership's secret performance metrics, where employees were evaluated not just on sales numbers, but on maintaining what management called the right customer mix. She produced spreadsheets showing how salespeople who sold too many vehicles to minority customers, regardless of the profit margin, were passed over for promotions and gradually pushed out of the company. As Martinez concluded her morning testimony, the silence in the courtroom was deafening, broken only by the sound of her steps. As she returned to her seat, Gerald Maxwell had completely abandoned his usual confident posture, now sitting with his head in his hands as the full impact of her revelations settled over the courtroom like a heavy cloud. As testimony continued, the streets outside the courthouse transformed into a powerful symbol of solidarity. Dozens of luxury vehicles began arriving in a choreographed procession that caught the media's attention. BMWs, Mercedes, and Porsches driven by successful minorities lined the streets, their owners emerging in business suits and professional attire, each carrying stories of similar discrimination at high-end dealerships across the country. Social media exploded with black luxury hashtags as Thompson's case transformed from a single incident into a national movement for retail equality. Viral videos of the car procession reached millions of viewers within hours as successful minorities began sharing their own experiences of discrimination at luxury establishments, the movement growing far beyond the automotive industry to encompass high-end retail, fashion, and real estate. Inside the courtroom, Chen now took the stand, his testimony providing a damning contrast to Thompson's experience at Elite Motors. Security footage showed him receiving the red carpet treatment just days before Thompson was ignored the identical financial qualifications but drastically different treatment, laying bare the dealership's discriminatory practices. For the jury to witness his testimony sparked a new wave of social media activity as medical professionals across the country began sharing similar stories. Local news crews captured the growing crowd outside the courthouse as business leaders, entrepreneurs, and professionals of color continued arriving throughout the day, many taking time off from their own successful careers to show support. The sea of luxury vehicles parked along the streets served as a powerful visual statement, challenging stereotypes and presumptions about wealth and success in modern America. The case sparked immediate changes in the luxury retail industry as other high end dealerships scrambled to address their own practices. Several major automotive brands announced comprehensive reviews of their dealership networks, while luxury retailers across sectors began implementing new training programs and accountability measures. The ripple effects of the Thompsons stand reaching far beyond the original incident. Inside Elite Motors' other locations across the country, employees began coming forward with their own stories of witnessing discrimination. The company's carefully maintained image crumbling as more evidence emerged of systematic bias, reaching far beyond the single showroom where Dot Thompson had been ignored. Regional managers rushed to implement new policies, but the damage to the company's reputation continued to spread. Dale Thompson's medical colleagues organized their own show of support as dozens of surgeons and physicians arrived at the courthouse sharing stories of achieving professional success while still facing prejudice in luxury retail spaces, their presence adding weight to the growing movement as medical associations across the country began issuing statements condemning retail discrimination. Television coverage expanded beyond local news as national networks picked up the story. Journalists diving deep into the broader implications of retail discrimination in the luxury market. Financial analysts began examining the potential impact on high-end brands as consumers of color with significant purchasing power started questioning their loyalty to establishments with questionable practices. The courthouse plaza became a gathering point for community leaders, civil rights activists, and business professionals, all drawn together by Dot Thompson's courage in standing up to systemic discrimination. Impromptu speeches and networking sessions emerged as successful minorities shared strategies for navigating and challenging discriminatory treatment in high-end spaces. Social media influencers and celebrities began sharing their own experiences with luxury retail discrimination, turning the Black Luxury hashtag into a trending topic that reached millions. The movement sparked conversations about wealth bias and race in American society, leading to uncomfortable but necessary discussions in corporate boardrooms across the country. As the day progressed, news helicopters captured aerial footage of the growing line of luxury vehicles surrounding the courthouse, the image becoming a powerful symbol of the disconnect between minority wealth and presumptions of status. The visual impact driving home the message that success knows no color, while prejudice remained a barrier even for the most accomplished. Local businesses near the courthouse began offering support to the gathering crowd with high-end restaurants, sending catering trucks, and luxury hotels providing comfortable waiting areas for supporters. The community response transforming the case from a legal proceeding into a watershed moment for social change. As the movement continued to gain momentum hour by hour, thunder cracked outside the courthouse as the jury filed back into the courtroom. After just 4 hours of deliberation, their quick return sending whispers through the packed gallery. Dot Thompson sat perfectly still, her surgical precision evident in her posture, as the forewoman stood clutching the verdict form in hands that did not tremble. Elite Motors' stock price ticker displayed on reporters' laptops showed nervous investors already beginning to sell. Judge Harrison surveyed the courtroom with practiced eyes as she asked the forewoman if the jury had reached a unanimous verdict, the word yes echoing through the sudden silence that fell over the assembled crowd. Gerald Maxwell tugged at his collar, his usual confidence replaced by visible anxiety. As the moment of truth approached, Sarah Chen placed a reassuring hand on Dot Thompson's shoulder while maintaining her own steady gaze toward the jury. The foreman's voice rang clear and unwavering as she announced damages of $50 million, but the verdict went far beyond mere monetary compensation. The jury had found overwhelming evidence of systematic discrimination, demanding sweeping changes to Elite Motors' business practices, including mandatory oversight, external audits, and complete restructuring of management across all locations, the company's stock price plunged in real time on the courtroom monitors. Der Thompson remained stoic as the verdict details continued, the jury recommending the establishment of an independent oversight committee to monitor Elite Motors' hiring practices, customer service protocols, and sales procedures for the next 5 years. Maxwell slumped forward, his empire crumbling as the forewoman detailed requirements for quarterly audits and mandatory reporting of all sales interactions broken down by customer demographics. The gallery's reaction rolled through the courtroom like a wave as the full scope of the verdict became clear. This wasn't just about one incident or one dealership, but a precedent setting judgment that would reshape how luxury retailers approached diversity and inclusion across the industry. Reporters' fingers flew across keyboards as they rushed to break the story of what was already being called a landmark decision in retail discrimination cases. Judge Harrison proceeded to read additional requirements, including mandatory sensitivity training for all employees, external review of all customer interactions, and the implementation of a transparent pricing system that would prevent discriminatory markups. Elite Motors' legal team sat in stunned silence as the judge outlined penalties for non-compliance, including potential closure of dealerships that failed to meet the new standards. The verdict included specific provisions for monitoring Elite Motors' internal communications systems, addressing the coded language and secret rating systems revealed during the trial. Maxwell watched as years of carefully constructed systems designed to maintain preferred customer profiles were systematically dismantled by the judge's reading of the jury's decision. Outside the courthouse, the crowd that had gathered erupted in celebration as news of the verdict spread through social media channels. The line of luxury vehicles that had surrounded the building during the trial began a victory parade through the city streets, their horns creating a symphony of triumph that echoed through the downtown area. Der Thompson finally allowed herself a small smile as Judge Harrison concluded the reading, noting that the verdict would require Elite Motors to establish a scholarship fund for minority students interested in careers in the automotive industry, including sales management and ownership positions. The comprehensive nature of the judgment ensuring that change would extend far beyond the current case. The courtroom remained silent as the judge issued her final statements, addressing the broader implications of the case for the luxury retail industry as a whole, her words carrying the weight of history as she emphasized that discrimination in any form would no longer be tolerated, regardless of how carefully it was disguised behind policy and procedure. Sarah Chen gathered her documents as Maxwell and his legal team absorbed the full impact of their defeat, the once proud owner now facing not only massive financial penalties but also the complete dismantling of his business practices, the victory representing not just personal vindication for Der Thompson, but a seismic shift in how luxury retailers would be held accountable for discriminatory practices. As the judge gavelled the proceedings to a close, Der Thompson stood tall, embodying the dignity and determination that had carried her through the trial, her victory serving as a beacon of hope for others who had faced similar discrimination, while sending a clear message that success and wealth knew no color barriers in modern America. 1 year later, Der Thompson stood before a crowd of journalists and community leaders, her presence commanding attention as she cut the ribbon at the Thompson Institute for Retail Equality. Housed in the former Elite Motors flagship location, the building transformed from a symbol of discrimination into a beacon of change, gleaming glass facades now reflecting the faces of a diverse stream of customers and students alike. The institute had become a revolutionary force in the luxury retail industry, implementing comprehensive training programs that were now mandatory for high-end retailers across the country. Former Elite Motors employees who had opposed the discriminatory practices found new roles as instructors, sharing their experiences and teaching better practices. By Jessica Martinez headed the compliance division, ensuring other retailers didn't repeat the same mistakes. Gerald Maxwell had resigned in disgrace, selling his remaining shares in the company at a fraction of their former value, The new ownership, consisting of a diverse board of directors who had implemented sweeping changes across all locations, the Elite Motors name remained, but its practices had been completely transformed, making it a model for inclusive luxury retail. The waiting room, where Dot Thompson once stood ignored, now displayed her portrait alongside other champions of change. Dell Thompson emerged as a powerful voice for retail equality, featured in Fortune magazine as one of the year's most influential business leaders. Her case studied in law schools across America as an example of how one person could transform an industry. Her medical practice continued to thrive, but she now divided her time between saving lives in the operating room and saving dignity in the retail space. The Black luxury movement she had inadvertently sparked grew into a formal organization with chapters in every major city, providing support and advocacy for minorities in luxury retail spaces. High-end brands scrambled to partner with the organization, eager to demonstrate their commitment to change while facing careful scrutiny of their practices from newly empowered consumers. The Thompson Institute developed a certification program for luxury retailers, establishing strict standards for customer service and equal treatment, the certification becoming as crucial as financial ratings for high-end businesses. Nationwide quarterly audits and mystery shopper programs ensured compliance, while a public reporting system allowed customers to track retailers' performance in real time. Sarah Chen joined the Institute's legal advisory board, her expertise helping shape new industry standards, while providing guidance to other attorneys handling similar cases across the country. The precedent set by Duff Thompson's case sparked dozens of successful lawsuits against discriminatory practices in everything from luxury real estate to high-end restaurants. The former showroom floor now served as a training center where retail professionals learned about unconscious bias, customer service excellence, and inclusive selling practices, while the upper floors housed research teams studying patterns of retail discrimination and developing solutions. The Institute's waiting list for training programs grew as retailers recognized the business value of genuine inclusion. James Chen, who had unknowingly helped expose Elite Motors' discrimination, became a regular speaker at the Institute, sharing his experience as a contrasting example of customer service. His testimony during the trial now formed part of the core curriculum for retail professionals, demonstrating how different treatment of equally qualified customers revealed systemic bias. The scholarship program required by the verdict exceeded all expectations, creating opportunities for hundreds of minority students to enter luxury retail management positions. Graduates of the program spread across the industry, bringing fresh perspectives and inclusive practices to showrooms and boutiques nationwide. Their success stories featured prominently in the Institute's Hall of Achievement. Perhaps most significantly, the Institute's data showed a measurable change in luxury retail practices nationwide, with discrimination complaints dropping dramatically as retailers implemented the Thompson standards for inclusive excellence. The financial success of reformed businesses proved that ending discriminatory practices not only served justice but also improved bottom-line results. As Dot Thompson concluded her anniversary speech, announcing the Institute's expansion to multiple cities, she reflected on how a moment of discrimination had sparked a movement for lasting change. The luxury vehicles filling the Institute's parking lot now represented not just customer success, but the triumph of persistence over prejudice. As she walked through the transformed showroom, she smiled, knowing that her stand against injustice had created a legacy of equality that would endure for generations.